In the elegant ballroom of the Millbrook Country Club, a devoted accountant was about to uncover a web of deception that would shatter his family. What started as a celebration of recovery took a shocking turn when he came face to face with the truth behind 6 months of lies. David Matthews wasn't your typical number cruncher. For 15 years, he had spent his life meticulously analyzing financial discrepancies and detecting fraud in corporate accounts, known for his ability to spot inconsistencies that others missed. When he encountered his sister-in-law's miraculous transformation from cancer patient to radiant party host, he had no idea he was walking into a dangerous world of gambling debts and criminal threats. David's decision to investigate the medical bills and treatment schedules that didn't add up would lead to discovering that Lisa had never had cancer at all. What began as suspicions about inflated medical expenses would become a race against time to protect his family from violent debt collectors. The quiet Vermont community would never be the same after a fake cancer diagnosis exposed a gambling addiction that put innocent lives in the crosshairs of organized crime. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crystal chandeliers of the Millbrook Country Club cast warm light across tables draped in cream linen. Each centerpiece, a careful arrangement of white roses and baby's breath that probably cost more than David's monthly car payment. He adjusted his tie, the good one Sarah had insisted he wear, and watched his wife's face glow with pride as she spoke to another guest about Lisa's miraculous recovery. The doctors said they'd never seen anything like it, Sarah was saying, to Mrs. Henderson from the school where she taught. Just 6 months ago, we thought we might lose her. Now look at her. David followed Sarah's gesture across the room to where Lisa stood at the center of a small crowd, radiant in a midnight blue designer dress that hugged her curves perfectly. Her laugh carried over the gentle classical music, bright and infectious. Her skin had the kind of healthy glow that came from expensive facials, not chemotherapy. Her auburn hair fell in lustrous waves past her shoulders, hair that should have been thin and brittle, or gone entirely, if she'd truly endured the treatments she claimed. She's always been a fighter, Mrs. Henderson replied, dabbing at her eyes with a cocktail napkin. But to bounce back like this, it's truly a miracle. David's accountant's mind had been cataloging inconsistencies all evening. The lavish party itself, for one. The venue rental alone must have cost thousands. The catered food, the open bar, the string quartet, all expenses that seemed extravagant for someone who'd supposedly been fighting for her life and drowning in medical bills. Bills that he and Sarah had helped cover with their savings, their future, their trust. David, honey, you're being awfully quiet tonight. Sarah's hand found his arm, her touch gentle but concerned. Are you feeling all right? Just taking it all in, he replied, forcing a smile. It's quite a celebration. His father's face flashed in his memory, gaunt, hollow-eyed, the way cancer had carved away everything that made him recognizable in those final months. Dad had fought with everything he had, but the disease had been relentless. The treatments had left him weak, nauseous, barely able to keep down water some days. Yet here was Lisa, supposedly just months into remission, dancing like she'd never been sick a day in her life. Ladies and gentlemen, Lisa's voice carried across the room as she tapped her champagne flute with a butter knife. The room quieted, all eyes turning to the birthday girl. If I could have your attention for just a moment. David watched as Lisa's expression shifted, tears gathering in her green eyes. Her voice trembled with what seemed like genuine emotion as she began to speak. 6 months ago, I received news that changed my life forever. The word cancer has a way of stopping time, doesn't it? Everything else just fades away. She paused, pressing a hand to her chest. But standing here tonight, surrounded by all of you beautiful people, I'm reminded that we're never truly alone in our darkest moments. The room was silent except for the occasional sniffle. David felt Sarah's grip tighten on his arm. My sister Sarah and her wonderful husband David. Lisa gestured toward them, her smile radiant through her tears. They didn't hesitate for even a moment when I needed help. They opened their hearts and their home, and yes, their bank account to make sure I could get the treatment I needed. Applause rippled through the room. David felt heat creep up his neck as faces turned toward them, expressions of admiration and sympathy mixing in the warm light. Sarah beamed beside him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The doctors told me the odds," Lisa continued, her voice stronger now. "They said I had a 30% chance. 30%. But you know what? Sometimes 30% is enough when you have people who believe in you, who fight alongside you, who refuse to let you give up." More applause, louder this time. Someone shouted, "We love you, Lisa!" And others joined in with similar sentiments. David's jaw tightened. The numbers didn't add up. 30% survival rate suggested advanced cancer, stage 3 or 4. Those patients didn't recover this quickly. They didn't bounce back with this kind of energy and vitality. They certainly didn't look like they'd stepped off the cover of a magazine. "So tonight isn't just about celebrating another year of life," Lisa raised her glass. "It's about celebrating all of you, my chosen family, who helped make this life possible. Thank you for seeing me through the storm and into the sunshine. I love you all." The toast was enthusiastic, champagne glasses clinking throughout the room. David raised his glass mechanically, the bubbles tasting flat on his tongue. "Isn't she incredible?" Sarah whispered, wiping at her eyes. "I'm so proud of her strength. And David, I'm proud of us too. What we did, what we sacrificed, it saved her life." David nodded, not trusting his voice. $50,000. That's what they'd given Lisa over the past 6 months. Their emergency fund, Sarah's inheritance from her grandmother, money they'd been saving for the down payment on a house. All of it gone to help Lisa fight a disease that, looking at her, now, David was beginning to suspect had never existed. As the party continued around them, David excused himself to get some air. The October evening was crisp, the kind of night that usually cleared his head and helped him think. But tonight, his thoughts were a tangle of suspicion and guilt. How could he doubt Lisa when she'd just given such a heartfelt speech? How could he question his wife's judgment when Sarah knew her sister better than anyone? He was walking toward the parking lot when he heard Lisa's voice carrying from around the corner of the building. She was on her phone, hidden partially behind a decorative hedge. "Told you I'd have it by the end of the month," she was saying, her voice sharp and urgent, nothing like the emotional gratitude she'd displayed moments before. "The family bought the whole story completely. You should have seen them tonight, practically weeping into their champagne." David froze. "Of course I felt bad about it," Lisa continued, and then she laughed, a cold sound that sent ice through David's veins. "But you know what they say about fooling doctors and family members. The family's always easier." The line went quiet for a moment, and David realized she was listening to whoever was on the other end. "Look, I'll have your money. The birthday party was just for show, to keep them convinced everything's going according to plan. Another few weeks and I'll have squeezed enough out of them to cover what I owe you and then some." David's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct he had as a CPA, every red flag his professional experience had taught him to recognize, had been right. But this wasn't a client's books that didn't balance. This was his family being systematically defrauded by someone they loved. He backed away quietly, his mind racing. As he returned to the party, the celebration felt different. The laughter too loud, the smiles too bright. The whole elaborate facade suddenly visible for what it was. He watched Lisa work the room, accepting congratulations and sympathy with equal grace, and marveled at how perfectly she played her role. Back at their table, Sarah was showing photos on her phone to another couple, pictures of Lisa during her treatment that David now realized were probably taken during shopping, trips or spa days. "Look at her here," Sarah was saying, pointing to a photo of Lisa looking tired and wan. "This was during her 3rd round of chemo. She was so brave, never complained, not once." David studied the photo. Lisa did look unwell, but now he wondered if that was the result of makeup, strategic lighting, or simply the hangover from whatever she'd really been doing the night before. As the evening wound down and they said their goodbyes, Lisa hugged them both tightly. "Thank you again," she whispered to David, her green eyes looking directly into his. "I couldn't have done this without you two. You saved my life." The words should have warmed him. Instead, they felt like a confession of an entirely different sort. Walking to their car, Sarah chattering happily about the success of the party, David felt the weight of his discovery settling on his shoulders. His wife, kind, trusting, devoted Sarah, had been played for a fool by her own sister. They'd been robbed of their financial security by someone who was supposed to love them. But what could he do with this knowledge? How could he tell Sarah that her beloved sister, the woman she'd spent months caring for and worrying about, was nothing more than a skilled con artist who'd stolen their future? As he started the car and began the drive home through Millbrook's quiet streets, David realized that discovering Lisa's lie was only the beginning. The real question now was what he was going to do about it, and whether his marriage could survive the truth. The celebration was over, but David's real battle was just beginning. The numbers stared back at David from his laptop screen like an accusation. It was past midnight. Sarah finally asleep after spending an hour on the phone with Lisa, reliving every moment of the party. David sat in his home office, surrounded by the methodical order that had always brought him comfort. Rows of client files, his CPA certificate mounted on the wall, a calculator that had seen him through 15 years of tax seasons and audits. But tonight, that familiar environment felt foreign as he examined documents that Sarah had shown him with such pride over the past 6 months. Medical bills, payment confirmations, insurance correspondence, all the paper trail of what was supposed to be Lisa's battle for her life. The first red flag was glaring once he knew what to look for. The total medical expenses were remarkably low for someone receiving aggressive cancer treatment. David had researched average costs after his father's diagnosis. Chemotherapy alone could run $30,000 to $40,000 per cycle, not including the myriad of supporting medications, frequent blood work, and specialist consultations. Yet Lisa's documented expenses barely reached $15,000 over 6 months. David pulled up another browser window and began cross-referencing the medical facilities listed on Lisa's bills. Heritage Wellness Center, where she claimed to receive chemotherapy, was indeed a real place. But their website listed services like massage therapy, acupuncture, and holistic healing. Not a single mention of oncology or cancer treatment. When he dug deeper into their staff directory, he found therapists, wellness coaches, and alternative medicine practitioners. No oncologists. Anxiety and stress management, he murmured, reading their mission statement. Helping patients find peace through life's challenges. His phone buzzed with a text message. Sarah, from the bedroom. Can't sleep. So happy for Lisa. We did the right thing, didn't we? David stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Of course. Get some rest. The lie came easily, which troubled him more than he wanted to admit. He returned to his research, diving deeper into the financial records Sarah had meticulously organized in a folder labeled Lisa's Treatment. Every payment had been made in cash, always handed directly to Lisa rather than sent to medical facilities. When David had questioned this months ago, Lisa had explained tearfully that her insurance situation was complicated, that many of the cutting-edge treatments weren't covered, and that cash payments often secured discounts. We're so lucky to have someone like you keeping track of everything, Sarah had said at the time, kissing his cheek. Lisa doesn't have to worry about the business side because she knows you're handling it. Now, studying the pattern of payments, David saw what his trusting nature had missed. The amounts were always round numbers, 2,000, 5,000. Never the messy figures that real medical bills generated. No insurance copays, no separate charges for different services, no adjustment codes or provider numbers. Just clean, simple amounts that added up to exactly $50,000 over 6 months. David opened Lisa's social media profiles, something he'd never done before. Her Facebook and Instagram were set to public, filled with posts about her journey that had garnered hundreds of sympathetic comments and shares. But as he scrolled through the timeline, inconsistencies jumped out with glaring clarity. On March 15th, she'd posted a photo of herself looking pale and tired, captioned, "Second round of chemo today. Feeling grateful for the amazing medical team fighting alongside me. Cancer warrior. Never give up." But David remembered that date clearly now. March 15th was the day Sarah had called him at work, crying because Lisa was having such a hard time with the treatments and needed another $5,000 for medication. He'd transferred the money that afternoon without question. Yet here, just hours after that supposed chemotherapy session, was Lisa's Instagram story from that same evening. Multiple photos and videos of her at an upscale restaurant in Burlington, wine glass in hand, laughing with friends. Her makeup was perfect, her hair styled in elaborate curls. She looked nothing like someone who'd spent the day being pumped full of poison in an oncology ward. David's hands shook slightly as he scrolled. Further, the pattern repeated over and over. Posts about treatment days followed immediately by evidence of Lisa living her normal, healthy life. Dancing at a friend's wedding 2 days after a supposed chemotherapy session. Hiking photos from a weekend trip during what should have been her most intensive treatment period. Beach vacation pictures posted while she was supposedly too weak for visitors. The most damning evidence came from a check-in post from just last week. Quick stop at the casino with the girls. Sometimes you need a little excitement to keep your spirits up during recovery. She'd posted it with a laughing emoji and tagged 3 friends. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. The same Wednesday when she'd called Sarah in tears, claiming she was too sick from treatment to watch Emma that afternoon. Sarah had immediately rearranged her teaching schedule to help, even though she had parent conferences that evening. David leaned back in his chair, the full scope of Lisa's deception washing over him like a cold wave. This wasn't just about lying to get money. She was systematically manipulating Sarah's emotions, playing on his wife's deepest fears and love for family. Every canceled plan, every worried phone call, every sleepless night Sarah had spent worrying about her sister. All of it based on lies. He pulled up their bank statements and traced the money trail. Their emergency fund completely depleted. Sarah's grandmother's inheritance, meant for their future children's education fund, gone. The money they'd been saving for a house down payment evaporated. $50,000 that represented years of careful planning and sacrifice, handed over to someone who was probably spending it on designer clothes and gambling trips. The bedroom door creaked open, and Sarah appeared in the hallway wearing the oversized t-shirt she slept in, her hair tousled from restless turning. "David, what are you doing up? It's almost 1 a.m. He quickly minimized the browser windows, his heart racing. "Just catching up on some client work. You know how it is during busy season." Sarah patted over and placed her hands on his shoulders, beginning to massage the tension there. "You work too hard. And tonight was supposed to be about celebrating, not working. I know. I just had some things on my mind." "About Lisa." Sarah's voice was warm with understanding. "I know tonight was emotional, seeing her looking so healthy, so alive. It's still hard to believe how close we came to losing her." David's jaw clenched involuntarily. "Sarah, about the money we've been giving her." "I know $50,000 seems like a lot," Sarah interrupted gently. "But David, it saved her life. How do you put a price on that? Besides, she's going to pay us back once she's back on her feet. You heard her tonight. She's already talking about returning to work. Has she mentioned when that might be? The paying us back part?" Sarah frowned slightly at his tone. "She's been through a traumatic experience, honey. Money is the last thing on her mind right now. The important thing is that she's alive and recovering." David wanted to tell her everything right then. The words were right there, waiting to tumble out. The fake medical bills, the social media evidence, the phone call he'd overheard. But looking at Sarah's face, seeing the pure love and relief there when she talked about her sister's recovery, he couldn't bring himself to destroy that piece. Not yet. Not until he was absolutely certain. "You're right," he said instead. "I'm just tired. Let's go to bed." As they walked back to the bedroom together, Sarah chattering softly about plans to take Lisa shopping for new clothes. Now that she's feeling better, David felt the weight of his secret growing heavier. He was going to need more evidence before he could bring this to Sarah. Concrete, undeniable proof that even her loyal heart couldn't explain away. Because when he finally told her the truth about Lisa, it was going to shatter more than just their financial security. It was going to break Sarah's heart, challenge everything she believed about family loyalty, and potentially destroy their marriage if Sarah chose to believe her sister over her husband. But he couldn't keep living this lie. Tomorrow he would start digging deeper. Tomorrow he would find the truth that Lisa was hiding, no matter where it led. David called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. The lie came easier than it should have, rolling off his tongue as he spoke to his office manager about a sudden flu bug. By 9 a.m., he was parked, She wore a fitted workout outfit that showed off her toned figure, designer sunglasses, and carried a yoga mat under one arm. Her hair was pulled back in a high ponytail that swayed as she walked to her car, a late-model BMW that David was certain hadn't been in their family's financial discussions. David followed at a distance as Lisa drove through town, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. He felt ridiculous, like he was playing some elaborate game of make-believe. But every time doubt crept in, he remembered that phone call from the party, the cold calculation in Lisa's voice as she talked about squeezing more money from her family. Lisa's first stop was downtown Millbrook, at a building David had passed hundreds of times but never really noticed. The brass nameplate by the entrance read Thompson Psychological Services. Dr. Rebecca Thompson, according to the directory, specialized in anxiety disorders and stress management. Not oncology, not cancer treatment, therapy. David sat in his car for 45 minutes, watching the building entrance and wrestling with what this meant. Was it possible that Lisa was getting treatment for mental health issues while also receiving cancer care? Could this be part of a comprehensive treatment plan that Sarah simply hadn't mentioned? But even as he tried to rationalize it, David's professional skepticism wouldn't let him accept easy explanations. Lisa had specifically told Sarah she would be at chemotherapy appointments on the days she came here. She'd described nausea, fatigue, and pain that supposedly came from cancer treatments. She'd never mentioned therapy or psychological support. When Lisa emerged from the building, she looked relaxed, almost cheerful. She checked her phone, typed out what appeared to be a long text message, and then got back in her BMW. This time, she headed north out of town, toward the more rural areas where Vermont's small communities gave way to larger spaces between neighbors. The drive took 20 minutes, winding through countryside that was just beginning to show the first hints of fall color. David had to drop back further to avoid being noticed on the less crowded roads, but Lisa's destination soon became clear. Pinnacle Gaming, a sprawling complex that advertised itself as Vermont's premier entertainment destination. David had heard of the place but never visited. It was one of those establishments that existed in a legal gray area, offering skill-based gaming and entertainment experiences that skirted the edges of Vermont's gambling laws. The parking lot was filled with expensive cars, and the building itself was designed to look like a rustic Vermont lodge, complete with false timber beams and copper roofing. Lisa parked near the main entrance and walked inside like she owned the place. David waited 10 minutes before following, his heart hammering as he approached the entrance. A doorman in a suit that probably cost more than David's monthly salary asked if he was a member. "Just looking around," David replied, trying to sound casual. "My friend mentioned this place." The doorman's smile was practiced and empty. "Of course, sir. Feel free to explore our public areas. Our membership coordinator would be happy to discuss joining options if you're interested." The interior was dimly lit and sophisticated, more like an upscale hotel than David's mental image of a gambling hall. Soft jazz played in the background, and well-dressed servers moved between clusters of gaming tables and electronic machines. The clientele looked prosperous, men in expensive suits, women wearing jewelry that caught the light with every movement. David tried to look casual as he scanned the room for Lisa. He found her at a high-stakes poker table, a stack of chips in front of her that represented more money than he made in a month. She was laughing at something another player had said, completely relaxed and in her element. "First time here?" A woman's voice startled him. He turned to find a server with a practiced smile holding a tray of drinks. "Yes, just checking things out." "Well, if you decide to try your luck, the minimum buy-in for most tables is $500. Though that lady over there," she nodded, toward Lisa's table, "usually plays much higher stakes than that." "She's a regular?" "Oh yes, Lisa's been coming here for months. Sweet girl, though she's had some tough luck lately. Sometimes that's how it goes with high-stakes gaming, feast or famine." David's stomach dropped. "Tough luck?" "Well, I probably shouldn't say anything." The server glanced around and lowered her voice. "But she's been playing a lot more desperately lately. Usually she's pretty controlled, strategic. But the past few months, it's like she's chasing losses, you know? Making bigger bets, taking more risks. We've seen it before. People who start gambling to solve money problems usually just make them worse." The server moved on to other customers, leaving David standing frozen in the middle of the gaming floor. The pieces were clicking into place with horrible clarity. Lisa hadn't lost her job and then developed a gambling problem as a result of stress. She'd lost her job because of a drinking problem, developed a gambling addiction that put her in serious debt, and then fabricated cancer to get money from her family to cover those debts. But instead of using the money to pay off her gambling debts, she was using it to gamble more, probably hoping for a big win that would solve all her problems at once. David watched Lisa for another hour, noting how comfortable she seemed in this environment, how easily she interacted with other players and staff. This wasn't someone trying gambling for the first time, or even someone with a small, manageable habit. This was someone for whom this place had become a second home. Around 2 p.m., Lisa's luck seemed to turn sour. David watched her lose hand after hand, her cheerful demeanor growing more strained with each lost bet. When she finally left the table, her chip stack was considerably smaller, and her face showed the kind of stress that had nothing to do with cancer treatments. Outside, Lisa sat in her car for several minutes, talking on her phone. Even from a distance, David could see her gesturing, emphatically, her body language suggesting an argument or pleading. When the call ended, she sat with her head in her hands for a long moment before starting the car. David followed her back toward town, but instead of returning to her apartment, Lisa made another stop, this time at an ATM outside a bank downtown. David watched her make multiple transactions, apparently hitting her daily withdrawal limit across several accounts. The cash disappeared into her purse, and she drove back toward Pinnacle Gaming. The pattern was clear. Lisa was trapped in a cycle of gambling, losing, and desperately seeking more money to gamble with. The $50,000 from David and Sarah wasn't being used for medical bills. It was being fed into this addiction, probably lost as quickly as it was received. On the drive home, David's phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the display, and he answered with hands free, trying to keep his voice normal. "Hi, honey. How are you feeling? Still sick?" "A little better," David lied. "How's your day going?" "Good, but I'm worried about Lisa. She called during my lunch break, and she sounded really stressed. She said the doctors want to run some additional tests, and her insurance is giving her trouble about coverage. She might need help with another payment." David's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "How much?" "She wasn't specific, but she was crying, David. I haven't heard her sound that scared since the original diagnosis. I told her not to worry, that we'd figure something out. Sarah, maybe we should... I know money's tight, but we can't abandon her now. Maybe we could take out a loan against the house, or I could ask for an advance on my salary." David pulled into their driveway, his mind racing. Sarah was already thinking of ways to give Lisa more money, probably thousands more, money they didn't have and couldn't afford to lose. Meanwhile, Lisa was sitting at a poker table, burning through their sacrifices as fast as she could draw cards. "Let me think about our options," David said carefully. "We'll talk when I get inside." But as he sat in the car after hanging up, David realized that thinking about options wasn't enough anymore. He needed to know exactly how deep Lisa's deception went, and he needed evidence that even Sarah's loving heart couldn't explain away. Tomorrow, he would start making the kinds of inquiries he'd hoped never to make about family. Because if he was going to destroy Sarah's faith in her sister, he needed to be absolutely certain he was right. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And somewhere in his gut, David was beginning to fear that the truth was going to be much worse than anything he'd imagined so far. Dr. Rebecca Thompson's office was exactly what David had expected from a therapist's practice. Warm earth tones, carefully chosen artwork that suggested serenity without being cliché, and the kind of comfortable furniture that invited people to share their deepest fears. What he hadn't expected was how nervous he'd feel sitting across from her, spinning a carefully constructed lie about wanting to better support his sister-in-law. "I appreciate you taking the time to see me, Dr. Thompson," David began, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I know patient confidentiality is important, but Lisa suggested I reach out to you. She said you might be able to help me understand how to better support someone going through what she's experiencing." Dr. Thompson studied him with the kind of attention that made David's stomach tightened. "Treatment process?" I'm sorry, but I think there may be some confusion here, Mr. Matthews. My practice focuses exclusively on mental health. I'm not an oncologist, and I don't provide cancer treatment. Lisa has been seeing me for anxiety and depression management. The words hit David like a physical blow, even though he'd been expecting them. Hearing it confirmed by a medical professional made Lisa's deception feel more real, more cruel. I see, David managed. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Lisa has been telling our family that she's receiving cancer treatment, and we assumed. Dr. Thompson's expression shifted, concern replacing her professional caution. Mr. Matthews, I think we need to be very careful here. I can't discuss the specific details of Lisa's treatment without her explicit consent. But I can tell you that she's never mentioned having cancer to me. In fact, her sessions have focused primarily on anxiety related to financial stress and what she's described as family pressure. David felt like the room was tilting slightly. Family pressure? Again, I'm limited in what I can share, but Lisa has expressed significant anxiety about expectations from family members. She's mentioned feeling like she needs to be someone she's not in order to maintain important relationships. The irony was staggering. Lisa was seeing a therapist for anxiety about lying to her family, while simultaneously using that therapy as cover for more lies. Dr. Thompson, I need to ask you something directly, and I understand if you can't answer. Has Lisa ever mentioned gambling to you? The doctor's pause told David everything he needed to know before she spoke. Mr. Matthews, I think you and I need to have a very frank conversation. But first, I need to understand something. Are you here because you're concerned about Lisa's well-being, or are you here because you suspect she's been dishonest with your family? David weighed his options. He could continue pretending, maintain the fiction that he was just a concerned brother-in-law seeking guidance, or he could trust this woman who seemed genuinely concerned about Lisa's welfare. Both, he said finally. My wife and I have given Lisa $50,000 over the past 6 months. Money we believed was for cancer treatment. Yesterday, I followed her to a gambling establishment where she appeared to be a regular customer. Dr. Thompson closed her eyes briefly, and David saw genuine pain cross her features. I was afraid of something like this, she said quietly. Lisa has been struggling with gambling addiction for several months. It's been a significant focus of our sessions, along with her anxiety about the debts she's accumulated. How much debt? I can't give you specific numbers, but based on what she shared with me, it's substantial. She's mentioned owing money to what she calls dangerous people, and she's expressed genuine fear about what might happen if she can't pay. David's hands were shaking now. And the cancer story? Mr. Matthews, this is where I have to be very careful about confidentiality, but I will say this. Lisa has never mentioned having cancer to me, and her physical health has never been a topic in our sessions. Her anxiety and depression are real and serious, but they stem from her financial situation and what she describes as a web of lies she's created. The room was quiet, except for the soft ticking of a clock on Dr. Thompson's desk. David stared at his hands, processing the confirmation of what he'd already suspected. She's been using the therapy sessions as an alibi, he said finally. Telling my wife she was getting chemotherapy when she was actually here talking about anxiety. That would be consistent with the pattern of behavior she's described to me. Lisa is highly intelligent and very skilled at compartmentalizing different aspects of her life. She's created separate realities for different people, and I think she's become somewhat lost in maintaining all of them. What kind of dangerous people is she talking about? Dr. Thompson hesitated, clearly weighing her professional obligations against her concern for Lisa's safety. I can only tell you what she's shared with me, which is that she owes money to someone involved in illegal gambling operations. She's mentioned threats, though I've encouraged her repeatedly to contact law enforcement if she feels unsafe. And has she? Not to my knowledge. Lisa is terrified of her family discovering the truth about her gambling. She's convinced that if you and your wife knew, you would abandon her completely. In her mind, maintaining the fiction about cancer is the only way to preserve those relationships while also getting the money she needs to stay safe. David felt a complex mix of emotions washing over him, anger at being manipulated, but also a growing understanding of the desperation that had driven Lisa to such elaborate deception. "Dr. Thompson, what happens if we stop giving her money? If these people she owes are really dangerous?" That's exactly what Lisa is afraid of. And unfortunately, it's a realistic fear. People involved in illegal gambling operations often use intimidation and violence to collect debts. Lisa's anxiety about this isn't paranoia. It's based on real threats she's received. David leaned back in his chair, feeling the full weight of the situation settling on him. Lisa wasn't just a selfish manipulator taking advantage of her family's love. She was an addict trapped in a cycle of debt and deception, using their money not for medical bills, but to try to stay safe from genuinely dangerous people. "What should I do?" he asked. "My wife loves her sister. This is going to destroy her. Mr. Matthews, Lisa needs professional help for her gambling addiction, and she probably needs legal protection from whoever is threatening her. But most importantly, she needs to stop lying to the people who love her. The longer this continues, the more damage it's going to do to everyone involved. Can you help her with that? Can you convince her to tell the truth?" Dr. Thompson's expression was sad but honest. "I've been trying for months. Lisa is terrified of facing the consequences of her actions. She's convinced herself that the lies are protecting everyone, when in reality, they're making everything worse." David stood to leave, his mind already racing with the implications of what he'd learned. Lisa's deception was more complex than simple greed. It was the desperate action of someone drowning in addiction and fear. But that understanding didn't change the fact that she'd stolen their money and broken their trust. "Dr. Thompson, if Lisa is really in danger from these people she owes money to, and we stop giving her money, what do you think will happen?" The therapist was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I think Lisa is going to have to face the consequences of her choices eventually. The question is whether she'll have the support of her family when that happens, or whether she'll face it alone." As David left the office, he realized that his investigation had taken a turn he hadn't expected. This wasn't just about exposing a lie anymore. It was about trying to save someone who was drowning, even though she'd been pulling others down with her. But first, he had to figure out how to tell Sarah that her beloved sister wasn't dying of cancer. She was trapped in something that might be even more dangerous. The Riverside Casino sat like a neon tumor on the edge of the neighboring county, its gaudy lights visible from miles away across the flat farmland. David had never been inside a real casino before, and the assault on his senses was immediate. The electronic cacophony of slot machines, the thick cigarette smoke that seemed to hang in the air despite ventilation systems, and an underlying desperation that seemed to permeate everything. He'd been tracking Lisa's movements for 3 days now, documenting a pattern that painted a clear picture of someone spiraling deeper into addiction. Every morning, she visited Dr. Thompson's office. Every afternoon, she drove to either Pinnacle Gaming or this larger casino across the county line. And every evening, she called Sarah with updates about her treatment that bore no resemblance to how she'd actually spent her day. Today, David had arrived early and positioned himself near the casino's sports bar, where he could observe the main gaming floor without being conspicuous. He'd ordered a beer he didn't want and was pretending to watch a baseball game he didn't care about when Lisa arrived at her usual time. But today was different. Lisa wasn't alone. The man walking beside her was massive, easily 6'4", and built like someone who'd spent years in construction or perhaps prison. His hair was slicked back, and he wore a suit that looked expensive, but somehow menacing. Gold rings caught the light as he gestured while talking to Lisa, and David noticed that other casino patrons seemed to give them a wide berth. Lisa looked smaller next to this man, and for the first time since David had started following her, she looked genuinely afraid. Her usual confident posture was gone, replaced by hunched shoulders and nervous glances around the casino floor. David strained to hear their conversation as they passed near his table, but caught only fragments. "Told you the deadline was firm," and "can't keep making excuses," and most chillingly, "other ways to collect what's owed." They moved to a more secluded section of the casino, near the high-stakes poker tables. David waited a few minutes before following, using the maze of slot machines as cover. When he found them again, they were seated at a corner table. Lisa's face pale as the man spoke in low, urgent tones. "I understand your situation, Lisa. Really do, the man was saying, his voice carrying a distinct accent that sounded vaguely Spanish. But Mr. Rodriguez has been more than patient. You owe us $87,000, and that number goes up every day you don't pay. 87,000. David felt his stomach drop. That was nearly double what he and Sarah had given Lisa over the past 6 months. I'm getting the money, Lisa said, her voice barely audible. My family is helping, and I just need a little more time. Time is what we don't have. Mr. Rodriguez is starting to think you're not taking this seriously, and when he starts thinking that way, the man let the threat hang in the air. What does that mean exactly? Lisa's voice was stronger now, but David could hear the fear underneath. It means we start looking for other forms of collateral. Your daughter, for instance. Emma, isn't it? 16 years old, goes to Millbrook High School? David watched Lisa's face go white. You leave her out of this. Emma has nothing to do with my debts. She has everything to do with your debts if you can't pay them. Mr. Rodriguez doesn't like to hurt people, Lisa, but he's a businessman. If we can't collect money from you, we collect it from people who care about you. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone, showing Lisa something on the screen. David couldn't see what it was, but Lisa's reaction told him everything he needed to know. She gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. That's Emma leaving school yesterday, the man said conversationally. Pretty girl. Looks just like her mother. It would be a shame if something happened to that pretty face. You bastard, Lisa whispered, tears starting to flow. She's just a child. She's leverage, and if you don't have our money by Friday, she becomes our property until you do. David's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to intervene, to call the police, to do something to protect Lisa and Emma from this monster. But he forced himself to stay hidden, to gather information that might actually help them. I can get you $40,000 by Friday, Lisa said desperately. I can squeeze more out of my family, maybe take out loans. $40,000 is less than half of what you owe, and that's before interest. Mr. Rodriguez wants the full amount, or he wants collateral worth the full amount. What kind of collateral? The man's smile was cold. The kind that makes other people pay very quickly. Your sister seems to care about you quite a bit. And that husband of hers, he's got a successful accounting practice. Lots of access to other people's money. David's blood turned to ice. They weren't just threatening Lisa and Emma. They were planning to involve him and Sarah directly. You don't understand, Lisa said, shaking her head frantically. They don't have that kind of money. They've already given me everything they can afford. Then they'll have to find more, or suffer the consequences of your poor decisions. The man stood up, straightening his jacket. Friday, Lisa. $87,000. Or we start collecting in other ways. And once we start, we don't stop until we're satisfied. He walked away, leaving Lisa sitting alone at the table, with her head in her hands. David watched her for several minutes, debating whether to approach her directly or continue observing. The decision was made for him when Lisa suddenly stood up and walked quickly toward the casino's exit. David followed at a distance, his mind racing with the implications of what he'd witnessed. Lisa wasn't just gambling away their money. She was being threatened by genuine criminals who had already identified Sarah, Emma, and David himself as potential targets. Outside, Lisa sat in her car for nearly 20 minutes, crying and making phone calls. David was too far away to hear the conversations, but he could see her gesturing frantically, pleading with whoever was on the other end. When she finally drove away, David remained in the parking lot, his hands shaking as he processed what he'd learned. The situation was far more dangerous than he'd imagined. Lisa wasn't just a manipulative sister-in-law taking advantage of their generosity. She was a drowning woman whose desperation had put his entire family in the crosshairs of organized crime. The man had known Emma's name, her school, her schedule. He'd known about David's accounting practice and Sarah's connection to Lisa. These weren't idle threats from some small-time loan shark. This was a professional operation with the resources to gather intelligence and the willingness to target innocent family members. David's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Lisa called. She sounds really bad today. I think we need to consider taking out a home equity loan to help with her treatment costs. Can we talk tonight? He stared at the message, feeling the full weight of his impossible situation. If he told Sarah the truth about Lisa's gambling and the threats against their family, it would destroy her faith in her sister and potentially their marriage. But if he didn't tell her, they might continue to unknowingly fund Lisa's addiction, while remaining vulnerable to escalating threats from people who had no qualms about hurting innocent people. And underlying it all was a more troubling realization. Even if they gave Lisa every penny they had, it wouldn't be enough to pay off her debts. The interest was accumulating faster than any family could provide, which meant this was going to end badly regardless of what David and Sarah did. As he drove home through the Vermont countryside, David realized that his investigation had revealed something far more complex than simple deception. Lisa was trapped in a web that was tightening around all of them, and he was the only one who understood the true scope of the danger they were facing. The question now wasn't whether to tell Sarah the truth. The question was how to tell her in a way that would save their family from the consequences of Lisa's choices. Because Friday was only 4 days away, and David was beginning to understand that Marcus Rodriguez was not the kind of man who made empty threats. David hadn't slept in 48 hours. He sat at his kitchen table at 3 a.m, surrounded by printed bank statements, loan documents, and a legal pad covered with calculations that all led to the same impossible conclusion. Even if they liquidated everything they owned, they couldn't raise $87,000 by Friday. Sarah found him there when she came down for her early morning coffee, still in her pajamas and robe. "David, honey, what's wrong? You look terrible." He glanced up at her, this woman he'd loved for 8 years, who still believed her sister was fighting cancer with courage and grace. Her dark hair was tousled from sleep, and concern wrinkled her forehead as she looked at the financial documents spread across their table. "I've been running some numbers," he said carefully, "about our finances, our options if Lisa needs more help." Sarah poured herself coffee and sat across from him, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "I know you're worried about the money, but we'll figure it out. We always do. Sarah, what if I told you that Lisa isn't who you think she is?" The question hung between them like a loaded gun. Sarah's hand went still on his. "What do you mean?" David had rehearsed this conversation in his head dozens of times over the past few days. But now that the moment was here, every prepared speech seemed inadequate. "I mean, what if the cancer story isn't true? What if Lisa has been lying to us about everything?" Sarah's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, and then anger. "David, how can you even say that? I've seen her medical bills. I've talked to her after treatments. I've held her while she cried about being afraid to die. The medical bills are from a therapist, not an oncologist. The treatments are therapy, sessions for anxiety and depression. And the crying." David paused, trying to find the right words. "The crying is real, but it's not about cancer." Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I can't believe you're saying this. Lisa is my sister. She's been through hell, and instead of supporting her, you're, what? Making up conspiracy theories? Sarah, please sit down. Let me show you what I've found." "Found? David, what have you been doing?" This was the part he'd been dreading most. "I've been following her, watching where she goes, documenting what she actually does during the day." The betrayal in Sarah's eyes was immediate and cutting. "You've been spying on my sister?" "I've been trying to protect our family from someone who's been systematically defrauding us." "Defrauding?" Sarah's voice rose. "She's dying, David." "She needed our help, and we gave it to her because that's what family does." David pulled out his phone and showed Sarah the photos he'd taken of Lisa at the casino, time-stamped on days when she was supposedly receiving chemotherapy. "She's not dying, Sarah. She's gambling. And she's not just gambling with her own money. She's gambling with ours." Sarah stared at the photos, her face growing pale. These could be from before her diagnosis. Or maybe the doctors said gambling could help with stress relief. "Sarah." David's voice was gentle, but firm. "Look at the dates. Look at her hair, her skin, her energy level. This is not a woman undergoing cancer treatment." He showed her the social media posts, the financial inconsistencies, the evidence he'd gathered over days of investigation. With each piece of proof, he watched Sarah's world crumble a little more. "But the doctor calls," Sarah said weakly. She gets calls from her medical team. From Dr. Thompson, her therapist, not from an oncologist. Sarah sat back down heavily, staring at the evidence scattered across their table. When she spoke, again, her voice was barely a whisper. How long have you known? I started suspecting at the birthday party. I've been investigating for about a week. A week. Sarah's voice was flat. You've known for a week that my sister was lying about having cancer, and you didn't tell me. I needed to be sure. And Sarah, there's more. He told her about Marcus Rodriguez, about the threats, about the $87,000 in gambling debts. He watched his wife's face cycle through shock, denial, and finally, a kind of broken acceptance. So everything she told us was a lie, Sarah said finally. The diagnosis, the treatments, the recovery, all of it. The emotional pain is real. The fear is real. But the cancer never existed. Sarah was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were red with unshed tears. David, I need you to understand something. I've spent my entire adult life taking care of Lisa. After our parents' divorce, after all her problems with jobs and relationships and drinking, I was the one who was always there, being needed by her, being the stable one she could count on. It's been a huge part of who I am. I know. And now you're telling me that not only has she been lying to me, but she's put our family in danger because of her gambling addiction. David nodded, not trusting his voice. I feel like such an idiot, Sarah continued. All those times I rearranged my schedule to drive her to appointments, all the nights I stayed up worrying about her, all the money we gave up for our future. And she was just manipulating me. Sarah, no, let me finish. I'm angry at her, but I'm also angry at you. David's stomach dropped. At me? You could have told me your suspicions earlier. You could have investigated together instead of going behind my back. Instead, you made the decision to keep this from me for a week, while I continued to worry about my sister and plan ways to help her. I was trying to protect you. By lying to me? By keeping secrets? David, how is what you did any different from what Lisa did? The comparison hit David like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on Lisa's deception that he hadn't fully considered how his own secrecy would affect Sarah. You're right, he said quietly. I should have told you immediately. Yes, you should have. Because now I have to deal with not only discovering that my sister is a liar and an addict, but also with the fact that my husband didn't trust me enough to handle the truth. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of broken trust settling between them. Finally, Sarah spoke again. What do we do now? About Lisa? About the threats? About everything? I don't know. But Sarah, we can't keep giving her money. It's not helping her. It's enabling her addiction and putting us deeper in danger. And if we stop, these people hurt her, or Emma, or us, David had been wrestling with the same question. I think we need to talk to the police. And maybe we need to have an intervention with Lisa. Force her to face the truth about what she's done. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at their small backyard where they'd once planned to build a swing set for the children they'd hoped to have someday. Money that was now gone, given to support a fiction. I need some time to process this, she said without turning around. I need to figure out how I feel about my sister being a liar and my husband being a spy. The words stung, but David knew. He deserved them. Sarah, I love you. Everything I did was because I love you and I want to protect our family. I know, but love without trust isn't enough, David. And right now, I'm not sure who I can trust anymore. As Sarah left the kitchen and went upstairs to get ready for work, David remained at the table, surrounded by the evidence of his family's destruction. He'd thought that discovering the truth would solve their problems, but instead, it had created new ones. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked toward Friday's deadline, and David realized that saving their family was going to require more than just exposing Lisa's lies. It was going to require rebuilding the trust he'd damaged with his own deception. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to David's office. He was reviewing quarterly reports for a small manufacturing client when his secretary knocked. On his door, her expression uncertain. Mr. Matthews? There's a woman here to see you. She says she's your sister-in-law, but she seems upset. David's blood chilled. Lisa stood in his doorway, and she looked nothing like the polished, confident woman he'd been observing for the past week. Her hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her makeup was smudged like she'd been crying, and her hands shook visibly as she clutched her purse. Lisa, what are you doing here? We need to talk, David. Privately. Her voice was hoarse, desperate. David nodded to his secretary. Hold my calls, please, and close the door behind you. Once they were alone, Lisa collapsed into the chair across from his desk, her composure finally cracking completely. You know, don't you? She said, without preamble. You know everything. David studied her for a moment. This woman who had systematically deceived his family for months. Up close, he could see the toll her deception had taken. Dark circles under her eyes, a nervous tick in her left hand, the kind of exhaustion that came from living multiple lies simultaneously. Yes, I know. How long? I suspected at your birthday party. I've been investigating since then. Lisa laughed bitterly. Investigating? You make it sound so clinical. Do you know what it's like to live the way I've been living? To wake up every morning and try to remember which version of yourself you're supposed to be that day? I know you've been lying to us about having cancer while you gamble away the money we gave you to save your life. It's not that simple. Lisa's voice cracked. It was never supposed to go this far. Then explain it to me. Make me understand how you could look Sarah in the eye and tell her you might be dying. Lisa was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. It started small. I lost my job because I missed too many days. I was staying up all night gambling online, sleeping through meetings, showing up to work hungover. When Sarah asked why I got fired, I couldn't tell her the truth. She'd been so proud of me for finally getting my life together, for staying sober for 2 years. So you lied. I told her I was having health problems, that I needed some tests. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I could find another job and get back on my feet. Lisa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But then I owed money to the wrong people, and they wanted it fast. I thought if I could just get enough to pay them off and start over. You decided to tell us you had cancer. I researched it. I studied symptoms, treatment schedules, recovery timelines. I found a therapist who specialized in anxiety, so I'd have somewhere to go on treatment days. I created fake medical bills, practiced looking sick. Her voice broke. Do you know how much I hated myself every time Sarah cried over me? David felt his anger warring with an unexpected sympathy. Lisa's deception was calculated and cruel, but the pain in her voice was genuine. The money we gave you. Where did it go? Most of it went to Rodriguez's people. But David, it wasn't enough. It's never enough. Every payment just bought me more time, and the debt kept growing with interest. And when I had some of your money in my hands, sometimes I thought, maybe if I could just win one big hand, I could pay everyone back and nobody would ever have to know. So you gambled with our money too. I'm sick, David. I know that doesn't excuse what I've done, but I'm sick. When I'm at those tables, everything else disappears. The fear, the guilt, the shame, it all just goes away for a few hours. Even when I'm losing, even when I know I'm making everything. Worse, I can't stop. David leaned back in his chair, processing this admission. He'd seen enough addiction cases through his practice to recognize the patterns, but it was different when it was destroying your own family. Lisa, yesterday I saw Rodriguez's man threaten Emma. They know where she goes to school. They have photos. Lisa's face went white. What? You didn't know? They're planning to use her as collateral if you don't pay by Friday. No. Lisa stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. I told them my family was off limits. Rodriguez promised me. Rodriguez promised you nothing. These people don't care about your family boundaries. They see Emma, Sarah, and me as assets they can use to collect what you owe. Lisa was crying openly now, her shoulders shaking. This is why I couldn't tell the truth. I knew this would happen. I knew they'd hurt the people I love. Lisa, by lying to us, you've made us more vulnerable, not less. We can't protect ourselves from a threat we don't know exists. So what do you want me to do? Tell Sarah the truth and watch her hate me forever? Turn myself into the police and go to jail while Rodriguez's people take out their anger on my daughter? David stood and walked around his desk, sitting on the edge so he was closer to Lisa. When he spoke, his voice was gentler than it had been. I want you to let us help you. Really help you, not just throw money at a problem we don't understand. How? Even if you forgave me, even if Sarah could forgive me, we don't have $87,000, and that's what it would take to make this go away. Maybe we don't need to make it go away. Maybe we need to make Rodriguez go away. Lisa looked up at him, confusion mixing with hope in her expression. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time to involve law enforcement. People like Rodriguez operate because their victims are afraid to report them. But if we go to the police, they'll kill me, David. Or worse, they'll kill Emma. Not if they're in jail. You don't understand how these organizations work. Rodriguez isn't some independent operator. He's part of something bigger. Even if the police arrest him, there are others who'll take his place and come after us for revenge. David felt the weight of their impossible situation settling on his shoulders. Every solution led to more problems. Every option carried unacceptable risks. Lisa, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything else? Any other debts? Any other lies? Any other threats we should know about? Lisa was quiet for so long that David wondered if she was going to answer. Finally, she spoke in a voice so small he had to strain to hear her. The cancer story. It wasn't just for you and Sarah. What do you mean? I set up a GoFundMe page. I posted about my battle on social media. I let people from work, friends from high school, neighbors. I let everyone believe I was dying. David's stomach dropped. How much money? About $15,000 so far. People have been so generous, so supportive. There's a woman from my old job who's been organizing fundraisers. My neighbor started a meal train. Emma's school is planning a benefit concert. The scope of Lisa's deception was staggering. It wasn't just their family she'd manipulated. It was an entire community of people who cared about her. Lisa, this isn't just fraud anymore. This is criminal fraud on a large scale. If this comes out, I know. Lisa's voice was sharp with panic. Don't you think I know that? Don't you think I lie awake every night thinking about all the ways this could destroy not just me, but everyone who's tried to help me? Then why haven't you stopped? Why keep digging deeper? Because I'm trapped. Lisa slammed her hand on David's desk, years of suppressed desperation finally exploding. Every lie requires 10 more lies to support it. Every day I don't tell the truth makes the truth harder to tell. And every dollar I owe Rodriguez is another day closer to something terrible happening to someone I love. David watched Lisa break down completely. This woman who had orchestrated such an elaborate deception, now sobbing like a lost child. Despite everything she'd done, despite the betrayal and manipulation, he found himself feeling sorry for her. Lisa, look at me. She raised her tear-stained face. We're going to figure this out, together. But it starts with the truth, all of it, to everyone. Sarah will never forgive me. Maybe not. But she loves you, and love is stronger than you think. And Emma? How do I tell my 16-year-old daughter that her mother is a liar and a criminal who's put her in danger? I don't know. But I know that living with the truth, however painful, is better than dying from lies. Lisa nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. What do you want me to do? First, we tell Sarah everything. Tonight. Then we figure out how to protect Emma and deal with Rodriguez. And then... David took a deep breath. Then you're going to have to face the consequences of what you've done. Including jail? Maybe. Probably. But Lisa, you're already in a prison. At least this way you might eventually get out. As Lisa left his office, David realized that tomorrow was Friday, Rodriguez's deadline. They had less than 24 hours to figure out how to protect their family from the consequences of 6 months of lies. But for the first time since this nightmare began, David felt like they might actually have a chance. Because the truth, however painful, was finally coming to light. And sometimes, the truth was the only thing powerful enough to save you. The confrontation Sarah had been dreading took place in their living room at 8 o'clock that Thursday evening. Lisa sat on the couch where she'd spent countless hours over the past months, receiving sympathy and support based on lies. Now, with David beside her and Sarah across from them in the armchair that had been her grandmother's, the room felt like a courtroom. Sarah's face was a mask of controlled fury. She'd had the entire day to process David's revelations, and her initial shock had crystallized into something harder and more brittle. "I want to hear it from you," Sarah said, her voice steady but cold. "All of it. Every lie, every manipulation, every moment you looked me in the eye and told me you might be dying." Lisa's hand shook as she reached for the glass of water David had brought her. "Sarah, I need you to understand—" "No." Sarah held up her hand. "You don't get to qualify this or explain it away. You don't get to make me understand. You get to tell me exactly what you did to our family, and then I get to decide whether I ever want to see you again." The harshness in Sarah's voice seemed to physically wound Lisa. She flinched and looked down at her hands. "I never had cancer," Lisa said quietly. "The diagnosis was fake. The treatments were therapy sessions with Dr. Thompson for anxiety and gambling addiction. The medical bills were fabricated. Everything I told you about being sick was a lie designed to get money from you and David." "How long?" 6 months. Since March. "And the money we gave you?" "Most of it went to pay gambling debts. Some of it I gambled with, hoping I could win enough to pay everyone back and end the lies." Sarah's composure cracked slightly. $50,000, Lisa. Our emergency fund, my inheritance from Grandma Rose, the money we were saving for a house. You took all of it based on lies. I know. Do you? Do you really know what you've done?" Sarah stood up and began, pacing, her teacher's instincts for controlled presentation warring with her personal devastation. "I called in sick 6 times to drive you to fake appointments. I rearranged parent conferences, missed Emma's school play, turned down a promotion, opportunity, because I told my principal I needed flexibility to help my dying sister." Lisa was crying now, but Sarah continued relentlessly. "I lay awake at night researching clinical trials for you. I called cancer support groups asking for advice on how to help family members cope. I bought books about grief and loss because I was preparing myself to watch you die." "Sarah, please." "I'm not finished." Sarah's voice rose. "I told everyone at school about your courage, your strength, your inspiring battle against cancer. Mrs. Henderson started a prayer circle. For you. The entire 3rd grade team has been asking about your recovery. I've been sharing updates about your progress based on lies you told me." David watched his wife pace, recognizing the signs of someone reaching their emotional breaking point. Sarah was a private person by nature, and the realization that she'd been unknowingly spreading Lisa's deception to her colleagues and friends was clearly devastating her. "And Emma," Sarah continued, turning to face Lisa directly. "Your own daughter. She's been terrified for months that she was going to lose her mother. She came to me crying 3 weeks ago because she was afraid you were going to die before she graduated high school. What kind of mother does that to her child?" "A sick one," Lisa whispered. "Sarah, I'm sick. Maybe not with cancer, but I'm sick. The gambling addiction, the lying, the way I can't seem to stop making everything worse. That's not normal behavior. Don't you dare use addiction as an excuse for what you've done to us." Lisa looked up, her eyes red but determined. "I'm not using it as an excuse. I'm using it as an explanation. Sarah, do you remember when Dad had his drinking problem? Do you remember how he'd lie to us, steal money from Mom's purse, promise to change, and then do the same things over and over?" Sarah's expression flickered with old pain. Their father's alcoholism had torn their family apart when they were teenagers, eventually leading to their parents' bitter divorce. Dad's drinking didn't make him pretend to have cancer to steal money from his children. No, but it made him lie about where the grocery money went. It made him miss my graduation because he was passed out in his car behind Murphy's Tavern. It made him choose alcohol over his family every single day for 3 years. This is different, Lisa. Is it? Or is it just a different addiction that led to different lies? Lisa leaned forward, desperate to make her sister understand. Sarah, When I'm at those gaming tables, everything else disappears. The anxiety, the shame, the fear. It all goes away. Even when I'm losing. Even when I know I'm destroying my life. Those few hours feel like the only time I can breathe. David had been silent through most of this exchange, but now he felt compelled to intervene. Lisa, I understand that addiction is a disease, but you didn't just lie about having a gambling problem. You created an elaborate fiction about having cancer, complete with fake medical bills and scheduled treatments. That level of deception required planning and calculation. You're right, Lisa said simply, and I hate myself for it. Do you think there's been a single day in the past 6 months when I haven't wanted to tell you the truth? Do you think I enjoyed watching Sarah cry over me? Or seeing Emma's face when she thought she might lose her mother? But you kept doing it, Sarah said flatly. Every day, you made the choice to continue the lie. Because I was trapped. Once I started, stopping meant admitting everything, losing everyone I love, and still facing the consequences of the gambling debts. David leaned forward. Speaking of those debts, Lisa, we need to talk about Marcus Rodriguez and what's going to happen tomorrow. Sarah's head snapped around. Who's Marcus Rodriguez? David and Lisa exchanged a look. In the emotional intensity of confronting the cancer deception, they hadn't yet addressed the more immediate danger facing their family. Sarah, David said carefully, the people Lisa owes money to aren't just casino operators. They're involved in illegal gambling operations, and they've made threats against our family if the debts aren't paid. Sarah's face went white. What kind of threats? Lisa spoke up, her voice barely audible. They know about Emma. They know her school schedule. They have photos of her. If I don't pay them $87,000 by tomorrow, they're going to use her as collateral to force payment. 87,000? Sarah sank back into her chair. Lisa, that's more than David and I make in a year. I know. And they've threatened Emma? And potentially you and David as well. They know about David's business. They know we're family. They see you as leverage they can use against me. Sarah looked between David and Lisa, the full scope of their situation finally becoming clear. So not only have you stolen our money and lied to us for months, but you've also put our entire family in danger from criminals. Sarah, I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could handle it, pay them back, make everything right before anyone got hurt. But you couldn't. And now Emma. Sarah's voice broke. Now my 16-year-old niece is being targeted by criminals because of choices you made. David stood up and moved to sit on the arm of Sarah's chair, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Sarah, we need to focus on protecting Emma and ourselves. We can deal with everything else after we're safe. How? We don't have $87,000. Even if we sold everything we own, liquidated our retirement accounts, took out loans against the house, we couldn't raise that kind of money by tomorrow. Lisa wiped her eyes. I've been thinking about that all day. There might be another way. What do you mean? David asked. I could disappear. Leave Vermont, change my name, start over somewhere else. If Rodriguez can't find me, maybe he'll eventually give up and move on to other debts. And leave Emma behind? Sarah's voice was incredulous. Emma would be safer without me. She could stay with you and David, finish high school, go to college. Rodriguez has no reason to hurt her if I'm gone and unreachable. Lisa, you can't be serious. I am serious. It might be the only way to protect everyone I love from the mess I've created. David shook his head. Lisa, people like Rodriguez don't just give up because their target disappears. They have resources, connections. And besides, running away doesn't solve the immediate problem, tomorrow's deadline. Then what do you suggest? Lisa's voice was sharp with desperation. Because I'm out of ideas that don't involve someone getting hurt. The room was quiet for several minutes, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Sarah spoke. We call the police. Sarah. No, Lisa said immediately. These people will retaliate. They'll hurt Emma before the police can do anything. Then we get Emma out of town first. Send her to stay with Aunt Margaret in Boston until this is resolved. David considered this. That might work. But we'd need to do it tonight. Quietly. Without anyone knowing where she's going. And then what? Lisa asked. I go to jail for fraud, and Rodriguez's people come after you and David for revenge? Maybe, Sarah said firmly. But at least we'd be dealing with the truth instead of more lies. Lisa stared at her sister, recognizing the finality in her voice. You're never going to forgive me for this, are you? Sarah was quiet for a long moment before answering. I don't know, Lisa. I honestly don't know if I can forgive someone who looked me in the eye and told me they were dying when they were really just stealing from me. I'm still your sister. Are you? Because the sister I thought I had would never have done this to her family. The words hung in the air like a physical barrier between them. David watched Lisa's face crumple as she absorbed the full weight of what she'd lost. There's something else, Lisa said quietly. Something I haven't told you yet. David's stomach dropped. What? The cancer story. I didn't just tell it to you. I've been running a GoFundMe campaign, posting on social media, accepting donations from friends and coworkers. There's been about $15,000 raised so far. Sarah's face went through several expressions before settling on something. That looked like disgust. How many people, Lisa? I don't know exactly. Maybe 100 who've donated money. Probably thousands who've seen the posts and shared them. Jesus Christ. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, staring out at their quiet neighborhood. You've turned my sister's fake cancer into a community-wide fraud operation. I know how it sounds. Do you? Do you know that Mrs. Patterson from down the street asked me last week if she could organize a meal train for you? Do you know that Emma's school is planning a benefit concert? Do you know that people who can barely afford their own bills have been giving money to help someone they thought was dying of cancer? Lisa was sobbing now, the full weight of her deception finally visible. I never meant for it to spread like that. It started small. Just a few posts to make the story seem more believable for you and David. But once people started responding with sympathy and money, you didn't stop it. No, I didn't stop it. David's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and felt his blood turn cold. Lisa, who else knows about tomorrow's deadline besides us? No one. Why? David showed them the message. Payment due in 18 hours. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. M. They have my phone number, David said quietly. They know who I am and how to reach me. Sarah turned from the window, her face pale. This is really happening, isn't it? We're really being threatened by criminals because of Lisa's gambling debts. It appears so. Lisa stood up abruptly. I'm calling Emma. I'm telling her to go stay with a friend tonight, somewhere these people won't think to look for her. And then what? Sarah asked. And then I turn myself into the police and tell them everything. About the gambling, the debts, the threats, the fraud, all of it. Lisa, no, Sarah. You're right. I've been making the situation worse with every lie, every attempt to handle this myself. It's time to let someone else take control. David watched Lisa pull out her phone to call Emma, and realized that they were finally at the point where the truth was going to come out completely, whatever the consequences. Sarah, he said quietly, there's something I need to tell you, too. She looked at him warily. What now? When I was investigating Lisa, I should have told you immediately what I suspected. Instead, I kept gathering evidence for a week, while you continued to worry about her and plan ways to help. I violated your trust just like Lisa did, even if my motivations were different. Sarah studied his face. Are you apologizing? I'm acknowledging that I handled this wrong. You deserve to know the truth from the beginning, and I made the decision to keep it from you because I thought I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself too. You wanted to be sure before you destroyed my relationship with my sister. David nodded. You're right. And I'm sorry. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then reached out and took his hand. We're going to get through this, David. But we're going to do it together, with complete honesty, no matter how painful the truth is. As Lisa finished her phone call and began explaining to Emma why she needed to leave town immediately, David squeezed Sarah's hand and realized that their marriage might actually survive this crisis. But first, they had to survive tomorrow, because Marcus Rodriguez's 18-hour deadline was ticking down. and they still had no idea how they were going to protect their family from the consequences of 6 months of lies. The truth was finally coming out. But David was beginning to understand that sometimes the truth arrived too late to save you from the choices you'd already made. Emma Matthews Chen arrived at the house at 10:30 that night, her teenage face a mixture of confusion and fear that broke David's heart. At 16, she had her mother's green eyes and delicate features, but there was a strength in her jaw that reminded him of Sarah, a resilience that she was going to need for what was coming. "Mom, what's going on?" Emma asked as she set down her overnight bag. "Your phone call didn't make any sense. Why do I need to leave town? And why won't you tell me where I'm going?" Lisa sat on the couch, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past few hours. The confident, manipulative woman who had orchestrated months of deception was gone, replaced by someone who looked fragile and defeated. "Emma, sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk. Are you sicker? Is the cancer getting worse?" Emma's voice cracked with the kind of fear that only a child facing the potential loss of a parent could feel. David watched Sarah flinch at the word cancer, the reminder of how deeply Lisa's lies had affected everyone, including her own daughter. "Emma," Lisa began, then stopped, clearly struggling with where to start. "What I'm about to tell you is going to be very hard to understand, and you're going to be angry with me, probably angrier than you've ever been with anyone. Mom, you're scaring me. I don't have cancer, Emma. I never had cancer. Everything I've told you about being sick for the past 6 months has been a lie." Emma stared at her mother for a long moment, processing words that didn't seem to make sense. "What? Do you mean you don't have cancer? I've seen you sick. I've driven you to appointments. I've watched you throw up and lose weight and—" "Those were anxiety attacks, not chemotherapy side effects. The appointments were with a therapist, not an oncologist. The weight loss was from stress and not eating, not from cancer treatments." Emma's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked like relief. "So you're not dying? You're not going to die?" "Not from cancer, no." "Then why—" Emma stopped, the relief on her face beginning to shift toward suspicion. "Mom, why would you lie about having cancer?" Lisa looked at David and Sarah, drawing strength from their presence before continuing. "Because I'm sick in a different way, Emma. I have a gambling addiction, and I owe a lot of money to some very dangerous people. I told everyone I had cancer so they would give me money to pay my debts." "You what?" The transformation in Emma's expression was swift and devastating. The fear and confusion were replaced by a look of betrayal so profound that David had to look away. "You made me think you were going to die so you could steal money from people." "Emma, it's more complicated than that." "No, it's not." Emma stood up, her voice rising to a shout. "It's exactly that simple. You lied to me about dying. Do you know what that did to me? Do you know how many nights I couldn't sleep because I was afraid I'd wake up and you'd be dead?" Lisa was crying again, but Emma was beyond caring about her mother's tears. "I changed my college plans because I didn't want to go too far away in case you got worse. I turned down the summer program at NYU because I wanted to spend what I thought might be your last summer with you. I've been seeing the school counselor twice a week because I was having panic attacks about losing my mother." "Emma, please." "And Aunt Sarah and Uncle David, they gave you money, didn't they?" "Money they needed for their own lives," Sarah spoke up quietly. "Yes, Emma. We gave your mother $50,000 because we thought it would help save her life." Emma's face went white. $50,000? That's their whole savings, isn't it?" "Yes." Emma turned back to her mother, and David could see the exact moment when whatever remained of her childhood innocence died. "You stole $50,000 from the people who love you most by pretending to have cancer." "Emma, I was desperate. I owed money to people who threatened to hurt you if I didn't pay them back." "What people? What are you talking about?" David intervened before Lisa could answer. "Emma, your mother owes money to some criminals involved in illegal gambling. They've threatened to hurt you if she doesn't pay them back by tomorrow." "How much money?" $87,000. Emma sank back onto the couch, the full scope of her situation finally becoming clear. "So, not only did you lie to everyone about dying, but you've also put me in danger from actual criminals. That's why you need to leave town tonight, Lisa said desperately. Aunt Margaret is expecting you in Boston. You'll be safe there until we figure out how to handle this. Handle this how? You just told me you owe nearly $90,000 to criminals. Where exactly is that money going to come from? The room was quiet. Finally, Lisa spoke. It's not. We don't have that kind of money. Tomorrow I'm going to turn myself into the police and tell them everything. And then what happens to me? You'll stay with Sarah and David. They'll take care of you while I deal with the consequences of what I've done. Emma looked around the room at the three adults who had shaped her life, her expression cycling between anger, fear, and a kind of bitter maturity that no 16-year-old should have to develop. So let me understand this correctly. My mother has been lying to me for 6 months about having cancer, stealing money from family members, gambling with criminals, and putting my life in danger. And now she's going to go to jail, and I'm supposed to just… What? Go live with my aunt and uncle and pretend this never happened? Emma, Sarah said gently. We know this is overwhelming. Overwhelming? Emma's laugh was harsh. Aunt Sarah, overwhelming is having too much homework or fighting with your best friend. This is my entire life being built on lies. She turned back to Lisa, her voice growing colder. Tell me about the gambling. All of it. Lisa looked like she wanted to deflect, to soften the truth somehow, but something in Emma's expression convinced her that complete honesty was the only option left. I started gambling online about 2 years ago. Small amounts at first, just for fun, but then I started losing, and I kept betting more to try to win back what I'd lost. I lost my job because I was staying up all night gambling and couldn't function during the day. 2 years? You've been lying to me for 2 years? The gambling, yes. The cancer story started 6 months ago when I owed so much money that dangerous people were threatening to hurt you if I didn't pay them. How much money did you lose gambling? I don't know exactly. Maybe $200,000 over 2 years. Emma's face went completely white. $200,000? How is that even possible? It starts small, but the debts compound quickly when you're borrowing money to gamble with. And when you're losing, you convince yourself that the next bet will be the one that fixes everything. David watched Emma process this information, recognizing something he'd seen in other families dealing with addiction. The moment when a child realizes their parent is fundamentally different from who they thought they were. Emma, he said, carefully. I know this is a lot to take in, but right now, we need to focus on keeping you safe. The people your mother owes money to have already shown they're willing to threaten you to get what they want. What kind of threats? Lisa and David exchanged a look. Finally, Lisa answered. They know your school schedule. They have photos of you. They've said that if I don't pay them by tomorrow, they'll use you as collateral to force payment. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but cold. So these people know who I am, where I go to school, what I look like, and you think sending me to Boston is going to protect me? Emma, what are you suggesting? Sarah asked. I'm suggesting that running away doesn't solve anything. If these people are as dangerous as you say they are, they'll find me eventually. And even if they don't, what kind of life is that? Living in hiding because of my mother's gambling debts. What else can we do? Lisa asked desperately. Emma looked at her mother with an expression that was far too mature for her 16 years. We tell the truth. To everyone. The police, the people who donated money thinking you had cancer, the school administrators planning a benefit concert in your honor. Everyone. Emma, if we do that, you'll go to jail for fraud. I'll have to live with the embarrassment of everyone knowing my mother is a criminal. And these gambling people will probably still want their money. But at least we'll be dealing with reality instead of more lies. David was struck by Emma's clarity of thought in the face of such overwhelming betrayal. She was handling this crisis with more maturity than many adults would have shown. There's something else we need to consider, Sarah said quietly. Emma, if your mother goes to jail and these criminals are still looking for money, you could still be at risk. They might see you as a way to pressure us to pay what your mother owes. Then maybe I should disappear, Emma said matter-of-factly. Change my name, move across the country, start over where no one knows about any of this. You're 16 years old, Lisa protested. You can't just disappear. Why not? You've taught me that lying and running away are acceptable solutions to problems. Why shouldn't I apply those lessons to my own life? The bitter sarcasm in Emma's voice cut through the room like a blade. David realized that Lisa's deception had damaged more than just their financial security. It had fundamentally altered how Emma viewed trust, family, and moral behavior. Emma, that's not fair, Lisa said. Fair? Emma's composure finally cracked completely. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I've spent 6 months thinking my mother was dying? Is it fair that Aunt Sarah and Uncle David have given up their financial security to help someone who was lying to them? Is it fair that people in our community have donated money they couldn't afford to give to someone pretending to have cancer? She stood up and began pacing, her anger finally finding its voice. Is it fair that I now have to live with the knowledge that my mother chose gambling over her family? That she was willing to let me believe she might die rather than admit she had a problem? That she put my life in danger to cover up her addiction? Emma, I never wanted any of this to happen. But it did happen, because of choices you made, every single day for months. Emma turned to face Lisa directly. Do you know what the worst part is? It's not even the lying or the stealing or the danger. It's that you made me love someone who doesn't exist. Lisa looked confused. What do you mean? The mother I've been worried about. The brave woman fighting cancer with such strength and grace. That person doesn't exist. She never existed. The real you is someone who lies to her daughter's face and steals from people who love her. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. David watched Lisa absorb the full weight of what she'd lost. Not just her family's money or trust, but her daughter's love and respect. Emma, Sarah said gently, people can change. Addiction is a disease, and with treatment. Aunt Sarah, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm not a child anymore. I can't be protected from the reality of who my mother is. Emma's voice was steady now, resigned. And I need to start making decisions based on that reality. David's phone buzzed again, another message from the same number. 16 hours remaining. Your family's safety depends on prompt payment. He showed the message to the others. They're not going to just go away, Emma said after reading it. And even if we had the money, paying them doesn't solve the underlying problem. My mother is an addict who will just accumulate more debts and put us all in danger again. So, what do you think we should do? David asked. Emma was quiet for a moment, then looked around the room at each of them. I think we call the police tonight and tell them everything. About the gambling debts, the threats, the fraud, all of it. I think we contact everyone who donated money and tell them the truth. And I think we prepare for the consequences, whatever they are. Emma, that could mean your mother goes to jail for years. I know. Emma's voice was steady. But I'd rather have a mother in jail for telling the truth than a mother who's free but still lying to everyone who loves her. Lisa was crying. Silently, but Emma's expression remained impassive. And if these criminal people come after us for revenge, Sarah asked, then we deal with that too. Together. Honestly. No more secrets, no more lies, no more trying to handle things ourselves, when we're clearly not capable of it. David looked at this 16-year-old girl who had just demonstrated more moral clarity than any of the adults in the room, and realized that whatever happened next, Emma was going to be okay. She'd been fundamentally changed by her mother's betrayal, but she hadn't been broken by it. Emma's right, he said finally. We call the police tonight. We tell them about the threats and the fraud. We let them handle Marcus Rodriguez and his people. And if they can't protect us? Lisa asked. Emma answered before anyone else could. Then at least we'll face whatever comes next with the truth instead of more lies. As David reached for his phone to call the police, he realized that the next few hours were going to determine not just whether their family survived this crisis, but whether anything worth saving would remain when it was over. The deadline was less than 16 hours away, but for the first time since this nightmare began, they were going to face it together, with complete honesty about who they were and what they'd done. It was terrifying. But it was also, finally, The truth. Detective Maria Santos arrived at their house at 11:47 p.m., accompanied by a younger officer David didn't recognize. Santos was a compact woman in her 40s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the kind of tired eyes that suggested she'd seen too much human behavior to be surprised by anything anymore. "Mr. Matthews? I'm Detective Santos. This is Officer Rodriguez. No relation to the Rodriguez you mentioned on the phone," she added with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I understand you have a situation involving threats and fraud." David led them into the living room, where the family had assembled like defendants awaiting sentencing. Lisa sat on the couch looking haggard and defeated. Sarah perched on the edge of her chair with the posture of someone expecting bad news, and Emma had positioned herself by the window, as if she were already planning her escape from this life. "Before we begin," Detective Santos said, settling into the chair David offered her, "I need to establish a few things. Mrs. Chen, you've indicated that you're willing to confess to fraud charges?" Lisa nodded. "Yes. I've been running a fake cancer campaign to solicit money from family members and the general public. I've collected approximately $65,000 based on completely false claims about having cancer. And Mr. Matthews, you've been threatened by individuals connected to illegal gambling operations?" David showed her his phone with the threatening messages. "These started yesterday. The person sending them claims to represent someone named Marcus Rodriguez who runs illegal gambling operations." Detective Santos examined the messages, then looked up. "Mr. Matthews, I need to tell you something. We're already familiar with Marcus Rodriguez and his organization. He's been operating in this region for about 2 years, and we've been building a case against him." The room went quiet. Finally, Sarah spoke. "You've been investigating him?" "We have an ongoing investigation into Rodriguez's operation. He runs high-stakes poker games and sports betting, primarily targeting people with existing gambling addictions. His methods of debt collection have become increasingly violent over the past year." Lisa leaned forward. "Violent how?" "2 hospitalizations in the past 6 months, both involving people who owed Rodriguez money. One woman in Brattleboro had her car firebombed after missing payments. Another man in White River Junction was beaten so severely he required reconstructive surgery." Emma spoke from her position by the window. "So, these threats against me are real?" "Unfortunately, yes. Rodriguez has shown a willingness to target family members, especially children, as a way to pressure payment from debtors." Detective Santos turned to Lisa. "Mrs. Chen, how much do you currently owe Rodriguez?" $87,000 as of yesterday. "And the deadline for payment?" David checked his phone. "About 14 hours from now." Detective Santos and Officer Rodriguez exchanged a look. "Mrs. Chen, I need you to understand something. Even if you somehow came up with $87,000 by tomorrow afternoon, Rodriguez would not consider your debt settled." "What do you mean?" "We've been monitoring Rodriguez's operation for months. Once someone reaches this level of debt, he typically uses them as examples to intimidate other debtors. Paying the money buys temporary safety, but he'll manufacture new reasons to demand more payments." Lisa's face went white. "So there's no way out?" "Not through paying him, no. Which is why your decision to come forward tonight was the right one." Detective Santos opened a notebook and clicked her pen. "Mrs. Chen, I need you to walk me through the entire timeline. When you first started gambling with Rodriguez's organization, how the debts accumulated, and every interaction you've had with them." For the next hour, Lisa recounted her story in painful detail. She described losing her job due to gambling, the escalating debts, the decision to fake cancer as a way to raise money, and the elaborate deception she'd maintained for 6 months. Detective Santos took notes without judgment, occasionally asking for clarification or specific details. "The therapy sessions with Dr. Thompson," Santos said. "You used those as cover for fake chemotherapy appointments?" "Yes. I scheduled them on the same days I told my family I was getting treatment, and Dr. Thompson was aware of your gambling addiction. She was treating me for anxiety related to the gambling and the debts. She knew about Rodriguez and his threats." Detective Santos made another note. "We'll need to speak with Dr. Thompson to corroborate your timeline." Emma had been silent through most of Lisa's confession, but now she spoke up. "Detective Santos, what happens to my mother now?" That depends on several factors. The fraud charges are serious. We're talking about a scheme that involved multiple victims and tens of thousands of dollars. However, Mrs. Chen's cooperation with our investigation into Rodriguez could result in reduced charges. What kind of cooperation? David asked. We've been trying to get evidence of Rodriguez's threats and intimidation tactics. If Mrs. Chen is willing to wear a wire and record her interactions with Rodriguez and his associates, that could provide the evidence we need to arrest him. Lisa looked terrified. You want me to spy on the people who've threatened to kill my daughter? I want to give you a chance to help us put them in prison before they hurt your daughter or anyone else's child. The room was quiet while everyone absorbed this proposal. Finally, Sarah spoke. Detective, if Lisa cooperates with you, can you guarantee Emma's safety? I can't guarantee anything, Mrs. Matthews, but I can tell you that Rodriguez is escalating. The threats against your family started this week, but they won't end this week. If we don't stop him now, he'll continue to use Emma as leverage against her mother indefinitely. Emma walked over from the window and sat down next to Lisa for the first time since learning about the deception. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Lisa looked at her daughter warily. Okay, if you could go back to 6 months ago, knowing everything you know now, would you make the same choices? Lisa was quiet for a long moment. You mean, would I still start the cancer lie? I mean all of it. The gambling, the lying, putting our family in danger. If you could go back, would you do things differently? Emma, of course I would. No. Emma held up her hand. Don't give me the answer you think I want to hear. Think about it seriously. 6 months ago, you were desperate and scared and addicted. You saw an opportunity to get money quickly and buy yourself time. Given who you were then and what you were feeling, would you really have chosen differently? David watched this exchange with fascination. Emma was essentially asking her mother to confront the reality of her addiction. The fact that addictive behavior isn't just a series of bad choices, but a fundamental change in how someone's brain processes risk and reward. Lisa stared at her, hands for a long time before answering. Honestly, I don't know. When I'm at those gambling tables, everything else disappears. The fear, the shame, the consequences, none of it seems real. So 6 months ago, when I was desperate and scared and convinced that one big win could solve all my problems, I might have made the same choices. That's what I thought, Emma said quietly, which is why I think you should cooperate with the police. Lisa looked surprised. What? Mom, you're sick. Dr. Thompson told you that. Everyone in this room knows it, and I think deep down you know it too. Addiction isn't a moral failing. It's a disease that changes how your brain works, but diseases can be treated. Emma turned to Detective Santos. If my mother cooperates with your investigation, would she be able to get treatment for her gambling addiction while she's serving whatever sentence she gets? Most likely, yes. Vermont has several programs specifically designed for inmates with addiction issues. And if she doesn't cooperate, if we just try to hide from Rodriguez and hope he gives up, then Rodriguez remains free to threaten and hurt other families, and your mother remains untreated for the addiction that created this situation in the first place. Emma nodded. Then I think she should do it. Lisa stared at her daughter. Emma, you could be putting yourself in more danger by asking me to spy on these people. I'm already in danger because of choices you made. At least this way, we're making choices that might actually solve the problem instead of just hiding from it. David felt a surge of admiration for Emma's moral clarity. Despite being betrayed and endangered by her mother's actions, she was still thinking about long-term solutions rather than short-term safety. Detective Santos, Sarah said, if Lisa agrees to cooperate, what exactly would that involve? We'd wire her for her meeting with Rodriguez tomorrow. She'd keep the appointment, explain that she doesn't have the money, and try to get him to make specific threats on record. If he threatens violence against Emma or your family, we'd have grounds for immediate arrest. And if something goes wrong, if he discovers the wire or becomes suspicious, Detective Santos was honest. Then Mrs. Chen would be in immediate, physical danger, and we'd move to arrest Rodriguez based on whatever evidence we had at that point. Lisa looked around the room at her family. You're asking me to risk my life to help you arrest someone I owe money to. I'm asking you to risk your life to protect your daughter and stop a criminal who's threatening other families in our community. The room was quiet for several minutes. Finally, Lisa spoke. If I do this, if I cooperate and help you arrest Rodriguez, what happens to my debt? The $87,000 I owe? If Rodriguez is convicted and his assets are seized, you'd have no legal obligation to pay gambling debts to a criminal enterprise. However, if you've borrowed money from legitimate sources to fund your gambling, those debts would remain, and the fraud charges against me would likely result in reduced sentencing in exchange for your cooperation, but you'd still face jail time and restitution to the people you defrauded. Emma stood up and walked to the window again, looking out at the dark street. How many other people has Rodriguez threatened? We know of at least 12 other debtors in similar situations over the past 2 years. And how many of them have children? Detective Santos checked her notes. At least 4 families with minor children have been threatened. Emma turned back to the room. So this isn't just about us. If Rodriguez isn't stopped, he'll keep threatening other kids like me. That's correct. Emma looked at her mother. Mom, I know I'm angry at you for what you've done to our family. I know I don't trust you anymore, and I don't know if I ever will again. But I also know that you're not a bad person. You're a sick person who made terrible choices. Lisa was crying again, but Emma continued. This is your chance to make a choice that protects other families instead of just trying to save yourself. It's your chance to do something brave instead of something selfish. David watched Lisa process her daughter's words, recognizing the weight of the moment. Everything that happened next would define not just their family's future, but Lisa's relationship with Emma for the rest of their lives. Detective Santos, Lisa said finally, if I wear a wire tomorrow and help you arrest Rodriguez, can you promise me that Emma will be protected while it's happening? We'll have undercover officers positioned around the meeting location, and we'll have additional units ready to respond immediately if anything goes wrong. And afterward, if Rodriguez has associates who want revenge, Rodriguez's organization is relatively small, and arresting him would likely cause it to collapse. However, we'd recommend that your family take precautions for several weeks after his arrest. Lisa looked at Emma, then at Sarah and David. I need to know that you all understand what we're agreeing to. If this goes wrong tomorrow, if Rodriguez discovers the wire or becomes suspicious, I could end up dead. And even if it goes right, I'm still going to jail for fraud. Sarah spoke first. Lisa, despite everything you've done, you're still my sister. And Emma's right. This is your chance to do something that protects other families instead of just trying to escape the consequences of your actions. David nodded. I agree. And Lisa, we'll take care of Emma while you're serving your sentence. That's not even a question. Emma walked back over and sat next to her mother again. Mom, I want you to understand something. I may never forgive you for lying to me about cancer. I may never trust you the way I used to. But if you do this, if you help stop Rodriguez from hurting other families, then at least I'll know that when it really mattered, you chose to do the right thing. Lisa wiped her eyes and looked at Detective Santos. What do I need to do? First, we need to finish documenting your statement about the fraud. Then we'll go over the plan for tomorrow's meeting with Rodriguez. And Mrs. Chen, thank you. I know this isn't easy, but you're potentially saving lives. As Detective Santos reopened her notebook to continue taking Lisa's statement, David realized that their family was about to face the most dangerous day of their lives. But for the first time since this nightmare began, they were facing it with complete honesty about who they were and what they'd done. Tomorrow, Lisa would risk her life to help arrest the man threatening their family. Tomorrow, they would learn whether truth and cooperation were enough to save them from the consequences of 6 months of lies. But tonight, sitting in their living room with a police detective documenting the full scope of Lisa's deception, David felt something he hadn't felt in weeks: hope. They were finally telling the truth. And sometimes, the truth was powerful enough to save you, even when it came almost too late. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.